We return now to our top stories. Europe's roadmap to be ready for conflict by the end of the decade, and Donald Trump's planned meeting with Vladimir Putin in Hungary. And here to break it all down is Roland Freudenstein, co-founder of the Brussels Freedom Hub. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Aaron. Great to be there.
A pleasure to have you, and well, what a night of breaking news. We're hearing from Donald Trump that he will sit down with Vladimir Putin in Budapest. This will be his first time on EU soil since Russia's full-scale invasion. What are you reading into this as we go to air?
Well, as we've seen over the past hour or so, both in Ukraine and in the EU capitals, all the alarm bells are going off again. We are back to square one of just, seeing a Trump-Putin meeting and fearing the worst. I think that in this respect, nothing has changed ever since Trump took over in the White House, and especially since the Oval Office meeting with Zelensky that went so terribly wrong end of February. So the fear is that Putin may make some kind of symbolic gesture, I don't know, maybe stopping air raids for a couple of days or something, and Trump reading this as a big compromise and a sign that Putin is ready for peace, and then turning around and putting pressure on Ukraine again to actually sell its own existence in some kind of crooked peace deal. That is the fear. Now, of course, there may be better outcomes of this meeting if it actually takes place. We don't know when. But the probability is that there will be a meeting Trump-Putin, and the fears are all back in Europe, including in Ukraine.
Well, is it possible that Donald Trump learned his lesson from Alaska, where he met with President Putin in Alaska, then President Putin ramped up the attacks in Ukraine? Is it possible that President Trump is thinking ahead of the ball this time?
Fingers crossed, but I wouldn't bet on it. Trump wants the Nobel Peace Prize. He believes that he already deserves it after Gaza. But he has now, for the last 2 days, focused back on the Russian invasion in Ukraine, and he desperately wants to be the peacemaker, the deal maker. And Putin knows that very well, and Putin has complimented Trump, and we've heard that from the White House today about the peacemaking ability and so on. And this is music to Trump's ears, and we have all seen occasions when this kind of flattery by Putin, which is based on intelligence about Trump. This flattery has worked in turning Trump around and turning him against Europe and Ukraine. So I think the fears are absolutely justified.
Speaking of the ties between the two, they've held a 2-hour phone call tonight. What does that tell you about their relationship?
Well, 1 hour or 2 hour phone calls are actually the rule with Vladimir Putin. I mean, that happened to other Western leaders as well, from Scholz to Macron to other people. So, I think what Putin does in these often monologues is explain the historical basis for what he calls removing the root causes of the Russian-Ukrainian war. That's the way he puts it. And I think he needs a lot of time in explaining that. What extent...
What is it that makes Donald Trump listen?
I'm coming back to my main argument. Donald Trump is desperate to be the deal maker and the peacemaker here. He certainly listens. He also talks his part of the conversation. He probably brought up the Tomahawk missiles, which seems to be a major threat, because just looking at the Russian reaction, we know that they really don't like this. But honestly, just like other threats of President Trump against Vladimir Putin, so far it's been all talk and no action. So I'm afraid that the new complaining about Putin and the encouragement of Ukraine to reconquer territory and so on by Trump recently has actually brought Putin into such a phone call, but whether it has changed Putin's maximalist position vis-a-vis Ukraine remains to be seen. And honestly, I'm really skeptical about that.
Worth remembering as well that on Friday, President Zelensky is meeting with Donald Trump at the White House. Trump also told us this week that, quote, it's time to get Russia done. I mean, what does President Trump now tell Volodymyr Zelensky, and how does Volodymyr Zelensky prepare for that meeting?
Well, I think he's going to wear a tie, as he did in recent weeks, personal meetings with Donald Trump, both in the White House and in other places. So I think he's going to prepare much better in the sense of commending the president, again, also making compliments about his peacemaking abilities, mentioning Gaza, mentioning other peace deals Trump has made over the past couple of months. I think, but the core of what Zelensky needs to do is to rub it in that Trump cannot afford to be seen losing Ukraine, and that accepting Putin's conditions for peace means exactly that, means for Ukraine to give up its existence as a free country, and thereby means for President Trump to actually lose Ukraine and to lose this struggle about a free and independent Ukraine. And that will hopefully, fingers crossed, work in getting Trump away from this idea of too much listening to Putin's points and pressuring Ukraine again.
Now, briefly back to Brussels, the roadmap announced today by the EU. Defence Commissioner Andreas Kubilius says, quote, self-sufficiency means our capacity to produce enough. Is it realistic for Europe to be ready for war, supplying and supporting itself by 2030? And speaking of Vladimir Putin, is he looking at Brussels now, looking at NATO now, and seeing if those institutions can pull it together?
Well, the glass is half full, I would say. If the EU manages to be ready for a conflict, and the conflict would be fought, of course, by military forces of the member states under NATO command, but the EU plays an increasingly important role in non-military capacity building, industry, technology, infrastructure, and so on. If that is really going to happen, then that's a major achievement. And the only thing is what happens in the 4 years between. And honestly, if I were Putin, I would test NATO and the West before that. So the next couple of years will be really decisive. And there we will still have to improvise. We still need US support in Europe. And we need as much as possible of US support and the support of the global coalition to help Ukraine in the meantime. So we need to hurry up. And by 2030, decisive progress is possible, but the dangerous period is actually in the upcoming years.
Roland Freudenstein, co-founder of the Brussels Freedom Hub, thank you so much for your time on a big night of news here on TVP World.
Thank you.
And that's all for World News tonight. Do stay with us here on TVP World for more. I'm Aaron Dahmen. Good night.